Hello and welcome to Rewildology, the show that explores conservation, travel, and rewilding the planet. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell-Norman, conservation biologist and adventure traveler. Take a moment to reflect on the brands you're most loyal to. What is it about their product or service that keeps you coming back over and over again? Is it their impeccable customer service, the quality standards they hold themselves to, how much they give back every year, or maybe their utter commitment to green practices? No matter the reason, you're a customer for life and will go out of your way to support them. Now imagine a coffee shop opens in your neighborhood with the same ethos. You visit for the first time and realizing while enjoying your cup of joe that a portion of your drink will be donated to wildlife conservation. The warm, fuzzy feelings hit you, and as you look around, you notice that the bright walls are full of rhino art and paintings. The owners clearly aren't donating as a marketing ploy. They believe in their mission, and by supporting them, you are helping them contribute to conserving rhinos. You decide right then that you're a customer as long as their doors are open, and walk away with a smile on your face. Can you relate to this story? It is in fact true. The Lekker Coffee and Watering Hole opened in my favorite part of Denver, the River North Art District, or Rhino for short. After I realized Lekker's purpose for opening their doors, I knew I had to talk to them. A flood of questions popped in my mind. What's it like opening a mission-based business? How does my cup of coffee contribute to rhino conservation? Why did they decide to go to such lengths of opening a brick-and-mortar business? I'm so happy to share that I had the opportunity to ask these questions and more for this week's episode. Today, I'm chatting with Kara Finkelstein, co-founder of Lekker. Kara was raised in California on 20 acres with farm animals galore. Growing up, she thought she'd become a veterinarian until she realized how many sick and dying animals she'd have to deal with on a daily basis. She shifted her studies but never lost her passion for wildlife. At the end of a backpacking trip through Europe, she decided to intern at Care for Wild, the largest rhino orphanage in the world. Her life was forever changed. She came back to the U.S. incredibly inspired and decided a coffee shop was the way she wanted to give back. She co-founded Lekker with her mother in October 2020 and hasn't looked back. I hope you all are ready to be super freaking inspired and get the push you need to start your big idea. You will literally have no excuses after you hear this episode. All right, everyone, here is my conversation with Kara. Kara, you're amazing. And I'm so excited to be sitting down with you right now and learning all about this beautiful coffee shop. So we are actually in your coffee shop right now in Denver, Colorado, in Rhino. And obviously, a lot had to happen to get to this point. So, yeah.
Just a little. It's just minute details.
Yeah. So take me back in time. Let's go back to even all the way back to your childhood, because I feel like all of this had to come together in some way. So take me back. How did you get to Denver and this coffee shop?
Yeah, well, I feel like there's so many different prongs. There's the whole animal piece, and then there's the business piece, and then there's like the family piece. So we kind of roll through them all. I mean, growing up, I always thought I was going to be a vet. I had horses. I grew up jumping horses. Was just full bore, like into like, let's save all the animals. Mom was just telling a customer yesterday about how I would like find a little baby bird on like, cause I grew up on 20 acres in California, and I would like bring it home and like put it in a little like a little washcloth and be like, I'm gonna save this bird. And Mom's like, I think the bird's gonna die. Like, I think. So that was just like growing up who I was. So we had all kinds of farm animals. So just growing up with that just kind of instilled the love of animals in me. And I never really thought about, conservation from like, oh my God, some of these animals could not be alive anymore. Like they could go extinct like while we're alive, until after I went to Africa. So that's like kind of down the road. But the whole family piece and business piece, I mean, my mom who opened the coffee shop with me, Dawn, we had a bar in our family from the 30s. I think it opened in the 30s and was like renamed in 1946. And so great grandma started it in the Depression. and ran it for a while. My grandpa ran it for a long time until he got sick, and then mom ran it for 10 years and was kind of like, so she was just a badass, always running these small businesses. And so I think that was kind of where it stemmed of like, okay, we could bridge all of this together and we could open something and have it be like this family run business where we also support something that people don't really think about in the area that we're in. So that was like the business piece. And then, there was some family stuff going on, and she was like, hey, what should I do next? And I had been living in Denver at the time for like 5 years. And I told her, hey, just come over here. I just gotten back from Africa. And she moved here. And we were like, hey, maybe we should do a coffee shop. But I think, there's so many jumbled little pieces. When I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, there's so much going on. So moved to Denver 7 years ago now to open an office for the company I was working for at the time. So it was technology consulting. They had asked me if I wanted to move to, I think it was Seattle, Austin, or Denver. And I never lived anywhere besides California. And so I was like, I'll go take weekend trips. Like that seems right. No, like not at all. Like that's how I was going to judge where I was going to live. And I took a weekend trip to each location. It was like whatever felt right. And Denver just was super cool. Everybody here is very chill. And ultimately I was like, I got my husband now, but boyfriend at the time, I'm moving to Denver. Do you want to come? He was like, what? So he ended up moving out here with me. We knew nobody. We ended up moving to Lohi, and we lived there for a couple years, and we were like, wait, this is pretty cool. But I wasn't loving the consulting company and working there. And it was just a lot of, not forcing people to work. That sounds really terrible, but I was like a staffing agency, and it was getting people to work in these tech jobs that I wasn't sure if they loved, and I wasn't loving either. And it's just all this money and not my favorite situation. So Brett was like, you should quit your job and we should go travel, which, every millennial, right? Let's throw in the towel. Let's spend all of our savings and go. And so we went to Europe backpacking for 2 months. And I had quit my job because I was like, I don't love it. I need to try to find something that I love, and that I can also give back and do more. And so Brett had just taken a leave of absence. So he ended up after the 2 months flying back to California to keep working. And I was just literally Googling, how can I get involved with African animals? I quit my job. I need to go do something while I'm over here. And so I found Care for Wild, largest rhino orphanage and sanctuary in the world, in South Africa. So it's in a town called Nelspruit. And I was just like, this sounds right up my alley. Cool, let's raise some money. Let's donate, and I'll go for a month and we'll just see how it goes. And so Brett left. I think we were in Spain at the time. He left, and then I flew from Spain to Africa and went and lived at this orphanage for a month, and just the most hands-on work I've ever done in my life. Which, growing up on 20 acres with horses and pigs and goats, I thought I was I can carry a bale of hay around. I'm fine. No. They'd be here's 40 bales of hay, carry them down the road. And I'm like, where are the hay hooks? What? I didn't know I needed, I didn't have gloves. I was just totally ripped up.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It was nuts. It was nuts. And so it was that. It was it was just a really, I absolutely loved it. I had forearm muscles. Girl, I had never had forearm muscles before. From whisking all of this milk for these little baby rhinos. So, little about Care for Wild, little snippet, since I'm hopping all over. They partner with Kruger National Park. So anytime a mother rhino is poached, that they can find the baby, they'll helicopter them to this facility. And, they then group them up into other little orphan crashes. And it's just the sweetest little thing. But when I was there, one particular rhino got delivered. I think she was 4 or 5 weeks old, they were guessing. And they were like, we don't know if she's going to make it because she's so small. And, she took the teat right away, though. And, now she's 3 and she's thriving, little Ruby Bell. And that was kind of a pivotal moment for me where I was like, wow, this is not only, catering to something that I'm very passionate about, but at the same time, they need a lot of money to be able to feed. I feel like they have 70 rhino probably now, maybe even more. But to be able to reproduce and like get all, they have 22,000 acres out there. And I'm like, there's a lot going on that like people don't even know is happening. I'm pretty sure like most people in Colorado have only seen a rhino just at the zoo or like,
with Dave.
Exactly. Yeah. Shout out to Dave. Yeah. So it was kind of this moment where I was like, wow, I'm seeing these animals just firsthand. And like, we're literally like saving them because they would have just died in the bush. And that was really, really cool for me. So after I finished that, I came home and I was kind of like, I got to get another job because I just spent all of my dollars. And so I ended up going back into tech, didn't love it again. And that was at the point where mom had been running the bar for 10 years. And she was like, oh my God, I just woke up and it's been 10 years. Like, what should I do next? And I'm like, well, I don't really picture you as like an 80-year-old running the bar. And she's like, well, I could. And so I was like, well, what if we did something together in Denver? Like, you know, I'm feeling super inspired after just getting back from this trip and you need something to do. And we both love humans and we're both morning people. And so I started walking around our neighborhood at the time, which when we moved back, it's called Rhinos. It's River North. It's RINO. And there's rhinos on the bikes in the bike lane. Like they really have gone full bore with
everything is rhino here.
But like no one talks about rhino conservation, which blows my mind. And so I was like, you know, this feels very right. And mom was like, you move there, so like there's rhinos everywhere. And I'm like, you know, we'll never know. But it felt very good. So we were like, okay. We were walking one night, just like walking the dog, and I saw a space for Elise. And so I was like, I'm just going to call and pretend like I know what I'm talking about. And I called and was like, hey, you know, my family's going to open a coffee shop and we're really interested in your space. And they were like, great, send me a concept. And I'm like, cool, yeah, I will get that over to you. And I'm like, get off the phone. And I'm like, what is what does that mean? And so I'm Googling, like, what is a concept? And I'm like, we don't have a name. We don't have a logo. Like, we have nothing. We just know that, like, we want to do something together. And so I ended up calling one of my friends who had gone to school with me, and she's a graphic designer. And so I think she's doing, like, product design or something, but she had been wanting to get into creating logos and doing things like that. So I'm like, girl, we got to bring some wine over and we're going to just make this concept. Cause like I think I need to make a business plan. Like these people want to see it and I don't have anything. And so that was really how things started from scratch and how we came to find the name Lekker and all of the things, I guess, in between. And now we're here. We've been open for almost 14 months, which is nuts. Absolutely nuts. Yeah, right?
Yeah. So I did want to drop a little plug to a previous episode for anybody listening. It's with Andre Roberts, and he is on the anti-poaching crew that is in Kruger.
Oh, cool.
He's the one that investigates the wildlife scene of rhino poachers. And
awesome.
He works really closely with Care for Wild because when a mama is poached and there's a baby, the place that you went is the one that's called to take that baby in.
Yeah.
So to hear all sides of it.
That's so cool. I just got the chills.
Yeah, exactly. To hear all sides of it. And I feel so many amazing rhino conservationists that have been on the podcast. And for you to actually then go to that orphanage, that was also, it's amazing.
It's all coming together.
It is. And I also just want to ask this, more of my own curiosity.
Yeah.
Why do you think you were so attracted to Care for the Wild? Why was it rhinos? Why was it South Africa? You could have done anything. You were in Spain.
I know.
So what was it about that? Where you're like, I need to go here.
I feel like it was just fate. Like there was really nothing. I knew I loved large animals. So I thought about going to vet school. I studied equine science in college. I was a big horse person. And I don't know. I mean, it weirdly works out that rhinos have like a very similar GI tract to horses, right? And I'm like, so I felt like without even knowing, I don't know, maybe that's why. I mean, I looked at elephant places as well in Africa. I think there was just this like fantasy ever since I was little, like going to Africa, right? I mean, going
was that
on
your first
safari.
time to Africa?
Yeah. Wow. I've still only been the once because I was planning on like, oh, we'll get groups of volunteers to go from the shop. It'll be amazing. And then COVID hit. And we were like, nope, not going to do that. So I still have only been the one time, but it was, I think just the idea of these huge animals being in the wild and like, you know, not having access to them here was just this, it had to have been this like fantasy of like seeing them and like, oh my God, this is incredible. I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
It literally just like happened.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just my life in a nutshell.
It's just like
go. Like, oh, holy shit, it's happening.
Yeah. I just really wanted to ask that because sometimes I don't know. It's just amazing how those life things just happen.
Yeah.
You're like,
honestly, I mean, looking back, I'm so grateful for finding them. I mean, who knows? Like, if Google's algorithm was like a little bit different that day, like maybe I would have found something totally different. But yeah, I think I just always wanted to go to Africa, and that just felt. I think it was also like I knew it was gonna be very hands-on, and I didn't want to do something where it was just like sitting in a classroom and like learning. I was like, put me to work. Like, I like this kind of stuff, and like, I want to pay to pick up shit. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, I want to do that. And my husband, Brett at the time was like, wait, you're going to go pay for a month to like literally like wheelbarrow thing? I'm like, yep, sure am. Here we go. So I think it was like a combo of like, you know, growing up and like feeling very comfortable in that environment. And just like, I just wanted to help somehow. I don't know, but it's turned into so much more now, which is amazing.
It's amazing how it's planted all of these seeds.
Right. So many things have just like fallen into place now. It's blowing my mind.
Yeah. So let's continue down this path.
Yeah.
So you could have done anything. You didn't even have to become a business owner. So one, why in the world did you decide to go into entrepreneurship? And two, why exactly a coffee shop? Because, I mean, look at all these places in Rhino. You could have done a boutique. You could have done a restaurant. You could have done open another bar, which your mom is very well versed in. So like both of those things. Why did you not decide to go get another job? And then why this coffee shop?
It's a really great idea. I ask myself this all the time. I'll start by saying we knew nothing about coffee. Like, I didn't even drink that much coffee. I just like black coffee normally. So it was never like, I went to a bunch of coffee shops for my job prior. And so I did get another job just because I was like, you know, I don't know how long this is going to take. Like, I don't know. And when I started with that job, it was actually the company that had brought me out here originally.
Oh, really? So you went like full circle.
I went back to them and I said, you know, I'm going to open a coffee shop. And I don't know if they believed me because they were like, fuck off, Kara. You don't know anything about coffee. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. But okay, whatever. And
you're cute.
So I was with them for another, I think 2 years. So it took a year and a half by the time we actually opened. And then I still worked for them for 6 months while we opened. So I would literally be on conference calls pulling espresso shots because like we opened in the middle of COVID and we didn't know like what was going to happen with everything. I'm like, shoot, I mean, I don't know if we're going to make $100 every day. Like, are we going to be able to pay rent? Like, are we not? Like, we can't hire anybody. So it was just me, Mom, and Brett for a while, which is hilarious to think about. But yeah, I had my little like headset on all the time. I would like run back for calls and I'd see there's a line and I'm like, oh, sorry, yeah, I've got to get back to you on that. Like, call you back in 20 minutes. And I'd run out and like help get shots going. So I think about this a lot about like why we did choose coffee. I think bar life is very hard. I think that you meet a lot of people that are like, it's my dream to open a bar. And I think something that a lot of people don't think about is like, it's late nights. You're dealing with drunk people all the time, which is kind of hard as like to not huge like women to like deal with something like that. I'm like, we would have to have security, like all these different things. And it's hard on relationships. It's hard on, there's so many different pieces that people don't necessarily think about when you're opening a bar. And so I think we all saw that firsthand with it, having been in the family for like 85, 90 years. So we were like, okay, maybe like alcohol would be cool. We do have our full liquor license now, which took me 9 months to get. Girl, espresso martini. But yeah, no, I think we were both like, okay, we love getting up early. And I think when I started calling around, it was kind of like, what is something that, because we had lived in the neighborhood for a couple years, and I'm like, what is something that like we could bring to the neighborhood that would be different? And I think there's some really phenomenal coffee shops in this neighborhood.
There really are, yeah.
Yeah, but none that really have like very like a bright ambiance. None that really have like a fun atmosphere. All have great coffee. Like some have really great food too. Liquor licenses. Like there's so many different pieces of it. But I'm like, I think we could do something where it's like very eclectic and very like bright. And like you walk in and you're like, oh my God, this is like overwhelming. And that was kind of what we were going for. And so I was like, well, yeah, maybe coffee. It was just kind of on a whim, honestly. And then we started looking into it and we were calling all these coffee roasters. And it just so happens that our coffee roaster is 4 blocks down the street. And they met with us and we tasted all these coffees. And I'm like, this is good coffee. Like, I haven't tasted coffee like this in a really long time. I'm like, I feel like with our personalities and we want to just be in there with the community, like coffee would be a good idea. And so it was really, there wasn't much talk about like, what else should we do? It was kind of just, we went for it. But that's kind of just how everything came into play. Like, I don't think much. My husband's always like, Kara, you need to think about these decisions. I'm like, but do I? Like, if we just go for it, you know, things just happen, right? So it's more just, I think, just going straight, like just full on going for it. And like once mom got on board and she's like, cool, I'll move there, like whenever we can get a lease signed, it was like, all right, let's just try it. And I think one of the biggest things people don't do is try something new. And so that was one of the things that we would always talk about is we're like, you know, let's see if we can just get a couple-year lease because they make you sign your entire life away, right? Yeah. And I'm like, oh God, hope I don't get a divorce in this process. But I'm like, you know, people don't try anything new because it's scary and it's very intimidating. And when you're signing like your house away in case things don't work out, it's extremely scary. And so our landlord is amazing in this space, but we were able to send a 2-year lease to start. And that was kind of like, okay, we've saved enough to be able to support that. And if we don't make it, we don't make it, but at least we tried. And so I think that was like a big thing that mom always raised me with. It's like, you know, you've always got to try something. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And then be okay with that, right? Like fail, and that's fine. But don't not try just because you're scared or it's intimidating or whatever. And so I think that was kind of how coffee came to be. Maybe.
Yeah. That was amazing advice. I mean, honestly, when you let fear dictate your life, it's crazy what you won't do or what you won't try.
Yeah.
Like if I listened to my gut, this podcast would have never
happened. 100%, right?
Like,
you can't overthink anything.
No, it's like I made a decision one day. Sounds like the same thing happened to you. Like the decision was made one day. We're like,
go.
I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm a scientist. I'm not an audio engineer. What in
now
the world?
Look at you. You got a whole like setup. You have a tripod for your little microphone. I love this.
This is microphone number 1. I'll definitely need to upgrade it.
But still, you got it. We're recording. We're live. We're in process.
Like, look, we've got a little video with all of your cute. Yeah, anyone can actually look right now and see how
all the
cute
things
this place is. Yeah, and just as a little backstory, everyone. So Dave Johnson has been mentioned so many times on this podcast because he's like the man.
He is
pretty much
Denver
conservation
rhino
god.
Man. Yes,
and he's in episode 2. And so how I got introduced to Kara and Dawn was we randomly came for happy hour. It's like a Lekker coffee shop. They just opened in Rhino. We need to meet here, and they just have their liquor license now, so we can have some drinks at this cute coffee shop. He's like, we partner with them all the time because at that time you just had the brand new painting that you had just hung up for Russell for his art for Rhino Week here in Rhino.
Yeah, it was it was perfect.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I had your new fashioned, of course, because I love bourbon. And then Ray, who is Dave's husband, got the martini, and I had to have a sip, of course. And it was just, I loved everything about this. And also, since this screen isn't like showing the full area, Wildlife Protection Solutions, Eric Schmidt, he has been on this podcast. You can see there's live streams here. You even have their headsets on. Yeah. You even have Care for the Wild video up there. So like, clearly you love this. You do this. Yes. This is your thing. And so that's how we got introduced. And then we reconnected on Instagram. Yeah. And I'm like, girl, do you want to be on the podcast?
I love it so much.
Yeah. But let's get more into why you're on this podcast. Because, I mean, obviously I'm not going to interview any normal coffee shop owner because that's not relevant.
Not in line.
That's not relevant. But your coffee shop is. Because like Aldi says, you have this amazing experience. You have all of this rhino paraphernalia around here. So what is your connection to conservation? What is all the things that you do through Lekker to help rhinos and the planet and anything else that you do that I probably don't know about?
Well, now I'm like, oh my God, I need to do so much more. No, so I mean, one of the reasons, so after coming back from Care for Wild and feeling super inspired, I'm like, look, let's get this open. But it was like from day one, and this number also just totally came out, but we're like, we're going to donate 10% of our profits back to Care for Wild. Like, we need to spread the word on what's happening. We need to help them do what they're doing. You know, it costs a lot of money to have the anti-poaching units that they have, to have all those volunteers come in, to have people coming in, and like, they have these like huts built for volunteers, and like, they're cooking for everybody and all these different things. And so it was just kind of from the get-go, okay, like 10% of what we make, we're going to donate back. And so that was kind of, I guess that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, it was figuring out how we could educate the community and like get people to feel the way that I felt, or at least as much as possible, to just see that there's so much more than just living in a big city. Right? Like there's so many other things that people could get connected to, whether it's rhino or any other animal or really anything, that like people can do so much more than just like live and work and eat and sleep.
Right.
Right. And I just feel like so many people get so stuck in this mindset. Like even now, so many people come in and they're like, oh God, like I have a bunch of meetings today. Like this really sucks. Can't wait to go to bed tonight. And I'm like, that's your day. Like that really, it's not ideal. So, I mean, eventually we can go back. I mean, traveling's like picking up a lot more now. But I would love to get like groups going back a couple times a year to like see Care for Wild and see Africa and like hook on to something that you can help with. You know, I think there's so many different things that people can do, and no one even knows what those opportunities look like. I mean, I know I didn't until I went. I was like, oh my God, like, there's so many things that we can be doing to help in just little tiny ways. So really that's it in a nutshell. And I think Denver and like the Denver community has been amazing. Wildlife Protection Solutions in particular. I mean, I think someone had written an article about us when we first opened about how we were donating back and, you know, giving a new meaning to like rhino and in the rhino neighborhood. And the guys from WPS just came in one day, I remember, and they were like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And I'm like talking to them about it, and they're like, can we put this screen up? Like, it would be amazing for people to be able to actually help in the fight against poaching and be able to like, you know, say, hey, there's this car where they're not supposed to be and all these different things. And they're like, let's partner on a lot of these things. And so I introduced them to Care for Wild, and now they've donated, I think 8 to 10 cameras, I want to say, to Care for Wild now, which is, I mean, just being able to make those connections and like help others. It's really, really cool to see where it's come now.
Wow. And I also recommend everyone go listen to that episode too, so that you can hear what Wildlife Protection Solutions.
Listen to that. Yes. What episode?
Oh my God, I gotta look it up.
Okay.
I just 51 episodes in. I didn't know that this was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, I don't know what episode that was. 14, 10? I don't know.
Well, it's there. I can't wait to listen to it.
Yeah. I don't even remember what it's called. But it's with Eric Schmidt, who is the executive director of Wildlife Protection Solutions.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So lots of rhino episodes for sure. So the one to hear the South Africa side. Yeah, to hear the South Africa side, and then also to hear this side as well. So everyone go check that out. But also too, so the next thing that I want to chat about, so in the conservation world, well, first, I want to ask, is your business a for-profit or non-profit?
We are for-profit.
Okay. Great. Because this is my next question.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and maybe even people listening to this, in the conservation world, for-profits have been kind of demonized. And because if you're a for-profit, that just means you're working for the man and you just want to steal money from someone else.
Fair.
I know that I used to have this feel. I did. It's just what was kind of ingrained in you. Like, if you're not sacrificing your life and living barely on ramen because you're just working on your passion and run for profit, then you're not doing it right. And then I kind of had a realization where, like, I can't live like that. And then it was the first, when I worked at Natural Habitat, which was the first for-profit that I worked at, where I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I've done more good for them because they have such a great business model that they're donating so much money back.
Yeah.
That, oh my God, everything I thought about for-profits has been completely flipped on side its head. And I feel like you're a perfect example of that too. And I don't know if you've experienced this at all, but like having your for-profit model, like you're able, like how much money you're donating.
Yeah, I think we're a little over $9,000 so far, which like goes so far in Africa, right? I mean, just in the first year. So we're so excited to see what we can go moving forward. I think that there's also, I mean, we didn't honestly even consider opening as a nonprofit. I think that there's so many different thoughts on for versus nonprofit. And I think there's also plenty of nonprofits that utilize their funds in a way that are not in a way I would do it, right? Like, I think we've seen plenty of examples of that over the years. And so for us, it was more, hey, let's start this as a family. Let's do something we love and care about. Let's be able to support, ourselves. And I mean, we didn't pay ourselves for 8 months and we were still donating to Care for Wild. Like I think we donated probably $5,000 before we even paid ourselves, even though it was supposed to be like 10% of profits. I'm like, we're not making money. But also like I want people to know, like, you're coming here and like, I want you to know that like you're buying a cup of coffee from us. And like some of that is going back to help these little orphan rhinos, which it just gets me every time. So I think that, there's so many different ways to think about that. But for us, it was more, hey, let's start this family business. Let's support each other. And like, there's no reason that we need, these X amount of dollars. Like, why? I just think, I mean, that's a whole different conversation of like monetary need. But I mean, I just was very, very passionate about wanting to make sure that a certain amount went towards that. And I got fought on that a lot. Like, even our accountants, like, Kara, like, because when we first opened, I'm giving like a neighborhood discount. I've got like a punch card going. I've got my 10% going back to the rhinos. And he's like, do you ever want to pay yourself? And I'm like, well, I do to D2 at some point, yes. And he's like, this is kind of rough. Like, this is a lot of money that you're planning on giving back. And I'm like, yeah, but that's like the epitome of like why we opened. And so I think that, there's kind of twofold to everything. But yeah, I mean, we're just happy to be here. We're happy people like our coffee. We're happy to be giving back as much as we are. And I mean, as long as we can just spread the word a little bit, I mean, that's really all that I can ask for. Because I think that was one of the things that we've talked about before, is like making sure that, when a lot of people come in here, it's a very cute space. And so people are constantly like, oh my God, let me post this photo to Instagram. And like, I want to tell people I'm here. And I'm like, yeah, but it's really hard to get the point across of like, hey, one of the main foundations of like why we are here is to help give back. And that's, people are like, what's up with all the rhinos everywhere? And I'm like, let me tell you, we've got a lot going on. So I think that that's also, a struggle that we go through. But, we're just working through day to day, just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And I just love that you have that, because even before you and I really connected, there's so many times that I've brought people here just because you donate.
Yeah.
And I know you do, because then you post it like this quarter.
Right.
I mean, like, you're very like open about it. You're like, this quarter, from all of you coming in and seeing us, we were able to give this amount of money to Care for Wild. Like, look, here it is. And I was like, I don't care what those prices are up there. It doesn't matter. I'm like, girl, just like tell me what it is. Let me put my card in there and I'm going to get my coffee. And even if someone isn't conservation minded, because you are a coffee shop, but you've like married two beautiful things together, and that's conservation and coffee, which are two of my favorite things.
Heyo.
You just have conservation coffee talks, which we've talked
about.
We're
in the works.
Maybe. That's a little nugget for everyone listening. Maybe starting those back up. I hosted them for about 2 years at my last company, but maybe doing it on a more community level. So conservation coffee talks. What other better place to do it?
Right, literally, right here.
right here.
I love it.
Right, awesome. So next, and I don't even know if maybe you've thought about this or if you have, but what do you think your bigger goal is for all of this? This beautiful
It's a really
space?
great question. So we just had our year anniversary, which was amazing. We had a band, it was super fun. And it's just really, really cool to see the community come together. Not only, I mean, there's the whole conservation piece and I mean, in general, but just being able to start a business in the middle of a pandemic was just incredibly stressful. Of like, I don't know if this is actually going to work. And so I think now that we're getting past the point of, I mean, well, in our first lease that we signed was 2 years. So in another 4 months, we'll have the option to sign for 5 years. And I think that's really when we're going to sit down and be like, cool, like, what do we actually want to do now that travel is happening again? And now that people, like when we first opened, we were at 25% capacity. I think 8 people could sit down at one time. And I was constantly having to police everybody, like masks on when you're not walking around. Like we had to I was literally just moving chairs around like all day long. Because people would be like, oh, I need this chair. And I'm like, nope, there's 10 people in here. I'm going to get fined. Like, this is really scary. At one point, you know, I think it was December, January timeframe, we went to 0% capacity. We had to rope everything off. Like, people could come in, grab their coffee, and leave. And so we've seen a lot of ups and downs already in the past year. But so it's really just been like a fight at this point of like, how can we keep like as much money staying in as possible so we can donate as much as we are. Like we have one part-time employee. Like that's literally it. We just started paying ourselves like a month ago. Like I've got to get like my third paycheck and it's 6 weeks. Yeah, I'm like, hey, you know, and it's not much, but it's exciting.
It's huge.
And so it's like, you know, we're trying to do everything in a way that supports like our original mission of like, let's give people good coffee, like, and we just keep saying, let's do good and drink good. Like, there's no reason you can't have like fantastic coffee, but also be donating back a little bit, even to something that you don't even know is really happening. And so just those little nuggets, I think we're just placing in people's heads, which is really cool. But, you know, long-term goals, it's hard to say, because I think for the first 2 years, we were just so focused on like, are we gonna solve a roof over our heads? Like, are people gonna like our coffee? Are people gonna want to come back? And so now is really the time frame in the next 3 to 6 months where I think we can really start planning things, because I think it's working, which is awesome. And I think that now we can really start getting involved with other local groups and doing these coffee talks and getting people going to Africa to actually see what else they can do, even if it's not Care for Wild, even if it's not rhino. I mean, going anywhere in the world and just like with Dave, the little sea turtles, like all of these different things that I'm now becoming aware of. I'm like, oh my God, I want to go on all these trips. And I'm like, but I got to be a barista. So we got like a lot going on.
I can totally feel you. But now you're to the point where this is like all coming together.
Right.
You're like, we didn't go
mind.
under.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you've really built an amazing space here, and all of you are sweet. Like, I mean, even before I would definitely call you a friend now. And even before that, just how all of you treated everybody that came in your door. And like I said, I've brought multiple people here.
Yeah.
Like before we really connected, I'm like, I love this coffee shop.
Oh,
Rhino's my favorite part of town. You're meeting me here.
This is where we're going. Yay. No, we really love, we just love people. And I think that was a huge piece of why we wanted to do something like customer facing. I mean, it's literally like everybody comes in and I'm like, how was your trip? Like, how's your dad doing? Like, he just had surgery. What's going on with that? And it's like, it's just fun. It's fun to get to know people. We're just really extroverted as well. So I feel like that probably helps. I'm like, we'll sit here and people won't come in for like an hour. And I'm like, I'm just feeling really tired right now. And Mom's like, get your ass a cup of coffee. You're fine. And people come in and then we're like, hey, like totally rebooted. So I think that definitely helps too. Like, you know, getting people also very hyped for their day with caffeine is nice as well.
Good for
yeah, right. It helps.
So you just touched on something that I would love to explore a little further. So you did open this coffee shop during COVID.
Yes.
Which blows my mind.
Same.
That you did that. I mean, when so many places were closing their door you're like, let's open brand new doors.
Yeah.
So take me through that a little bit. How exactly did that go? How did you open a coffee shop during this insane pandemic when we weren't even allowed to leave our house for a while?
Right.
Like, what was it like for you?
Not fun. It was, so I went to Care for Wild in 2017. And so since then, I think it was August of 2017. And Facebook clearly reminds me of these things all the time. It's like 1 year ago, you were here. And I think that after I'd come back and Mom and I had these conversations of like what we wanted to do, and we had settled on the coffee shop after having the whole concept conversation, and we created that concept and it was looking real good and we were feeling very confident in it. This was actually the third space that we settled in at and actually opened. So I think I want to say, I don't even know, like, it's hard to believe that's already almost 2022.
Yeah,
Like,
it really is.
That's weird. So we opened, like, when did we even open? In October of 2020. So it must have been in like 2019. We signed a letter of intent with a space probably like 4 or 5 blocks away. It was going to be, they were calling it like the Etsy of Colorado, and it was going to be a bunch of little stalls, probably like 20 or so, with a centralized bar. Super cool concept. And we were just gonna have 400 square feet. It was gonna be like a little coffee like section in that space. And we signed these documents and we were so excited. We had an architect draw up plans, and then somebody came in, one big company, and was like, we'll pay top dollar for like the whole space. So the leasing agent was like, well, that's a clear choice. Don't have to chase like 20 people for rent. I get rent from one person and I don't have to like negotiate all these terms. And they ended up going with them. So we got booted from that space. So that was pretty deflating. COVID hadn't even been a thing.
Yeah, it was 2019.
Yeah. Then we're looking for more spaces. We find a space on Brighton Boulevard, which is about another half mile, but the other direction. We sign a lease with these guys, have all of our HVAC drawings done out. We have full architectural drawings drawn out again. And that was at the point that COVID hit. And so it was in March that we had signed that lease. We had put quite a bit of money into the space already. There were other neighbors that were going to be in there with us. It was going to be kind of like another shared space, but with like half dividing walls. And I think there were going to be 5 units. We were in the back space as the coffee shop. And COVID hits. The landlord sits us down, is like, hey, I've given people the option to like back out if they want, which is pretty incredible. Like, that doesn't really happen. Like, I know a lot of people were like fighting with their landlords about terms and all these different things, but we hadn't started the build out yet. And so he's like, look, if you want to stay, I'll work with you and we can renegotiate terms and like lease price. And at the time we were like, we've been trying to do this for like a year and a half. We're going to stick with it. Let's stick with it. And so we did. And it hit like May or June and things were getting pretty bad. And things were closing and people weren't going to restaurants anymore and you weren't allowed to sit in coffee shops anymore. And we were like, oh God, this is kind of freaking us out a little bit. And the fact that we had to build out the space, and because of everything going on, like build out prices were skyrocketing. And like it was 3 times the amount that we were expecting. We didn't have the money. Chase was like denying our loans because we didn't have like a business plan. I mean, I give them my business plan, but they're like, you guys haven't made money. Like, I'm not going to give you all this money to be able to do this in the middle of this pandemic. So it was just a straight out no. And we're like, how are we going to fight? Like, it was probably 6 months of just like, oh my God, like, I don't know. We've already signed everything. I don't know how we're actually going to make this happen. And it was at that point in time when my neighbor, the space we're in right now was a coffee shop, closed down in December of 2019, so not pandemic related. The guy had just sold his business and it was connected to a burger joint across the hall. And so some guy was like subleasing it, I guess, and he ended up and walking away. It's a very strange story. Lots of rumors around that one. But we ended up coming to tour the space because I live 3 blocks away from here. And so I was like, my neighbor had said, why don't you look at the Hot Box Roaster space? And so called the landlord. We hadn't pulled out of the other space yet. And I was like, let's just go look. It was built out as a coffee shop, so we just need a facelift. I'm like, we wouldn't have to get a loan because we don't have to pay for like electrical and plumbing and all this crazy stuff that like I'm having to now think about that I didn't know anything about before. And so we met with them, and I was like, I'll be very honest, like we have a signed lease elsewhere, but if you guys can work with us on this, give me like 2 weeks. I'll see if I can get out of that and we can maybe do this. And it just ended up working out. And so we ended up pulling out of that space. We left a lot of money on the table there, but it ended up still being a situation where we saved money on the build out here. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, this just feels right. And this landlord was incredible in giving us the time and to do that too, we were really grateful because, you just read all these stories on the news of like evictions and like all of these things happening during COVID. And so we felt really, really grateful for 2 landlords that were like gems, absolute gems. And so, so then I think we looked at the space in like May, June, and we signed our lease in August. Sat in here, and the landlord literally grabbed the lease from us and was like, you guys, think about what you're doing right now. Are you sure you want to do this? And we're like, give us that piece of paper. Like, we are feeling ready. And mainly because it was a 2-year lease. I don't think we could have done a 5. You just don't know. Like, at that point, we didn't know what was going to happen. I think everything was, I can't even remember the capacity levels when we signed, but we opened on October 1st, which is my birthday, of 2020. And we had gotten our business license like 2 or 3 days before. And we're like, are we feeling ready? Absolutely not. Do we know how to make latte art? No. But let's just do it. Let's open and we'll see who comes and it'll be great. And so it was a lot of just like putting a lot of faith into just the space itself and just connecting with people. And we knew that we liked that. And it was a lot of just hoping that it would work. Honestly. And now we're here, which is really cool. It's really, really cool.
This is just crazy.
It's crazy. Hear. It's so crazy to relive it in my mind. I'm like, God, you're psycho. I'm literally a psychopath.
You're like, did I really make these life decisions?
Right? Looking back, I'm like, but it goes back to when I was talking about, I just like, in my mind, I just make these choices and just go full blown, like, yep, this is what we're doing. And I think that's, there's downfalls to those choices sometimes, but I think that more people, they should live their life that way.
Yeah.
Try new things.
Well, when you have a plan B, there's no way plan A is going to work.
Yeah, right.
If there's a door somewhere behind, you're like, okay, so if this doesn't work, I already have a job lined up at XYZ in downtown.
Right.
Then how in the world are you going to make this work?
Yeah.
Right.
It was just one of those things. I think when, to tie back in the conservation piece too, I think when you're that passionate about something and you're doing things for the right reasons, I think things do fall into place. And I'm a very big believer in the harder you work, the luckier you get, which is something my first boss taught me, which I really didn't love when he told me that at the time. So, you just want me to work harder and I'm randomly going to get lucky? Like, thanks, man. But I really think, we put a lot of like literal like blood, sweat, and tears into this place. Like all of this woodwork in here, I think you can kind of see on here. Like Mom and I did that.
Really?
We went to the like lumber yard and I was like doing all these math calculations and I'm like, we borrowed a nail gun and like a miter saw. I've never used any of those things before. But they're like these things that people quote you to do. It's like, you just got to put your mind to it and you can do it. Like you can really do anything. And I think that was a big realization for us with the space, for sure. Kind of fun. I love a nail gun. big nail gun gal.
Oh, that's awesome. So I would love to take a second here since you're well on this path. You've like made it past the hump, I would say, of like, okay, we're doing this. Yeah. We did not have to shut our doors during COVID or anything like that. So if there's anybody listening to this right now that are thinking something similar, like using entrepreneurship, a business of some sort to contribute to conservation or bettering the world in some way, what advice or ideas or thoughts or message do you want to share to those people that might have that thought in their brain right now?
Yeah, I think that you have to love what you're doing. I cannot tell you how many hours that we spent here being like, we're just fucking exhausted. Like people still coming out, wow, working with your mom, this is just crazy. This is so fun. And I'm like, believe me, there are some not fun times about opening a business. During the pandemic, you don't know what's going on. I think that you have to be extremely passionate about what you're doing. You have to be willing to put the time in and just being self-aware of like what that looks like. Because I think even for me, I mean, opening, it was kind of like, oh, we've got 3 of us. We can do this. There were like plenty of 100-hour weeks where you're just like, I would take naps in the back, like on the floor, because you're just exhausted. Like you can't formulate sentences or like think when you're so tired and you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to figure it all out. So I think finding other people that like making sure that you have the support that you need during those times. I mean, meeting with other business owners that have done this on their own, I have so much respect for, because it's like, it's so much work that you're putting into it. But just overall, if you're passionate about it and you love it, do it and try it. And, I think that a lot of people are afraid to start small too. I mean, I can't tell you how many people reach out to us and are like, hey, can I do a pop-up here? And I'm like, 100%. Like, come try something. Come see if people want to buy a product. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Wild Wax Candles.
No.
But a woman just started this candle company in Colorado, and she's selling candles, which we're going to be making gift baskets with, which I'm so excited about. But she donates 5% of her profits back as well, but to a variety of endangered species. And she has each candle like scent matched with like a different endangered species. Like I think I just bought a pangolin candle because I'm like, I love pangolin. And so I think that she just had a pop-up here last weekend. And so she's coming again in a couple weeks. And it's like, it's just trying something out that maybe it's a time that you feel like you lost your job, like you with podcast, just jumping right in and doing it. You just need to just like grab life by the horns and go. And it's super intimidating, but having a support system and just really fully making sure that like you actually love what you're doing this for. Cause there were plenty of times where I was like, dude, I don't know if we can do this. Like, and just having mom like, well, we're this far, so we're actually doing it. So get ready, like get up, set your alarm. I think is really big. And I think those are the things that people don't talk about. Everyone just talks about the successes all the time, not about the times where we sat in here crying on the floor, like, oh my God, are we gonna have enough money to actually like pay for our espresso machine? Like, can we do that? Like, do we know how to make this place look the way we want it? No, but just try. You got to try. And I think that's like a lot of people don't talk about like the hardships of actually starting a business. So I think there's the piece where it's like, go balls to the wall and like don't look back and just go for it, but also being realistic of, do I have the time? Do I have the funds to like support myself for the next 6 to 12 months? Because I probably won't be able to pay myself for that time. Being realistic about that too. And like being like nice to yourself, where it's like, give yourself some time to like think it through. I think is important.
Yes.
Right? There's some highs, there's some lows.
No, and I'm really glad you bring that up because, I mean, one thing about the podcast is it has to be transparent. Like, I ask everybody, tell me the bad with the good, because it is so easy to hit all the highlights, the Instagram highlight reels.
Oh God, yeah.
Like this is my life. Look at me. I'm over here. Like, and your Instagram is so much fun too. And like posting and all kinds of really fun stuff, but we don't necessarily see the hard side. We don't see you napping on the floor in the back.
Right.
I mean, your mom is super sweet, but I'm sure you've had arguments with her, maybe with your husband.
Yeah.
And like, and those hard moments, like, did we do the right thing? Did we make the right decision?
100%.
Like going in circles with yourself. And so I really love talking about that because anybody can walk in here and be like, you have the cutest coffee shop in Rhino.
Oh yeah, everyone's like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, there's a lot of things we need to think about first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And then to broaden it a little further, what message or advice would you like to say to anybody listening from whatever you want to say?
I think just anything that you want to do, just go do. I don't think enough people do that at all. And I think that's something like, even now with us having opened the coffee shop, like my husband coaches soccer and for the Rapids youth, and he loves it so much. And he's now coaching for them, but he wasn't 2 years ago. And I think he saw Mom and I doing our thing, and like we didn't know anything about coffee, and we're like, hey, look at this heart I just drew in this lot. He's like, what? Like, how's that happening? And I think it's so many people are passionate about different things, and I think just following, and it sounds so like cliche, like follow your dreams, but you only live once. And there's just not enough people out there doing what they want to be doing. And I think that a lot of that is like, financial struggle, which I totally understand, because it's expensive to live in cities and like do the things that you want to do. But I think that priorities can be made, and like you gotta just even if it's like a little bit of volunteering, like going to the zoo and looking at different things, talking to Dave, doing little things where you're like, hey, I can go volunteer at this place, and maybe that's not Africa yet because I've got to save money to go fly there and go volunteer and do this. I just think that people need to really evaluate what they love. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it was actually randomly some guy that comes in here that I used to work with, and he's like a director of software development at a tech company. And I was like, do you love your job? And he's like, I mean, I like my job and it pays the bills. And I was like, well, what could you do if you weren't doing that? Like, what would you do with your life? And he truly couldn't answer me.
Wow.
And it drove me absolutely nuts. And it happens all the time here because I'm like, okay, dream job, go. And everybody's like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, I just want you to know what you love. Like, I would just implore people to like sit down and like, whether it takes some meditating or like, just think about what brings you joy. And it's like, what is that? Like, Marie Kondo or something, like what sparks joy in your life? Where it's like the little silly things like that of like holding up a t-shirt and like, does it spark joy? Thinking about what in your life actually does bring you joy and what actually makes you happy and fulfills you. Because I think that so many people just stress me out all the time because they're just doing jobs that they don't like. And I mean, I did it for 10 years, Absolutely. Right? Like, and it wasn't until Brett was like, look, I booked us a flight to Iceland and I think you should quit your job and you're going to have to quit before we leave. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And just making sacrifices in your life to be able to do those little things, I think is just so important. Mm-hmm. And I mean, whether it has anything to do with conservation or not, I think just doing things for you is so important. My 2 cents.
That was beautiful. Kara, oh my God, you are such an inspirational person. And I am so grateful that you took the time to sit down with me and invite me in. And I love your coffee and I love your drinks. And if anybody is in Denver, if you're flying through or if you're visiting, please come to the Lekker Coffee Shop in Rhino. Come say hi to Dawn and Kara. They're both going to be here pretty much every time I've been in here. And Brett too. Like all of you have been in here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks wonderful. For having me. It's just super exciting. Okay. I mean, if anybody has any questions, we're here at the coffee shop every day. Yeah. 6:30 to 1.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of Rewildology. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button to never miss a future episode. Do you have a cool environmental organization, travel, story, or research that you'd like to share? Let me know at rewildology.com. Until next time, friends, together we will rewild the planet.